Many Europeans feel utterly disheartened.
Non consentirò che l'Italia diventi un campo profughi d'Europa.
My ambition is to lead and not to follow.
Italy rejected the EU migration deal, directly confronting Brussels and leaving Ursula von der Leyen searching for a way forward. On paper, this pact was supposed to be Europe's great solution, a historic fix to a growing crisis. But the moment Italy said no, the facade began to crack. Because once you strip away the polished speeches and staged unity, one truth stands out. Italy challenged the empire, and the empire flinched.
Quota of legal migration where it can be fully integrated can make a positive contribution to our economies, but I remain convinced that it would be more responsible for us to entrust European citizens with the solution to the European welfare system crisis. Decline is a choice.
Italy didn't reject the migration pact to make headlines. It rejected it because the system expected automatic obedience. Brussels assumed Italy would sign like everyone else, nod politely, and move on. Instead, Rome did the one thing the Commission is never prepared for. It disagreed publicly.
Lavoriamo ogni giorno per mantenere gli impegni che abbiamo sottoscritto con voi in ogni ambito, compreso quello del ripristino della legalità e del contrasto all'immigrazione illegale.
And this is where the real fracture appears. For years, the EU has operated on consensus held together by pressure, not balance. Italy sees the pact as another burden disguised as cooperation, a deal where coastal states handle the arrivals while Brussels controls the framework. Different workload, same lecture.
A model that was criticized at first, but that then has gained increasing consensus, so much so that today the European Union is proposing to set up return hubs in third countries.
One refusal exposed the weakness. If one member can freeze the process, the authority isn't absolute, it's conditional. Italy didn't destabilize the EU, it revealed that the stability was never as solid as advertised. A single no was enough to stop the machine.
This package reflects a fair and reasonable balance between responsibility and solidarity among member states.
The Migration Pact is marketed as Europe's big fix: efficiency, fairness, shared responsibility. That's the headline. Brussels calls it modern, humane, and necessary, but Italy looked past the presentation and saw a structure built to manage perception, not pressure. The pact centralizes decision-making in the Commission while leaving frontline countries to deal with the physical reality of arrivals. The promise is shared responsibility. The mechanism, critics argue, is redistribution on paper and concentration of power in practice. Supporters highlight border screening reforms and faster asylum decisions. But speed doesn't solve distribution, and new procedures don't change geography. Boats still land where they always have: Italy, Greece, Spain, not in the offices that design policy frameworks. And when redistribution fails, or when member states decline quotas, the burden doesn't move. It settles back where it started.
Firmly alongside those who defend their freedom and sovereignty.
So Italy raised the question Brussels avoids. If this pact truly levels responsibility, why do the same nations carry the same weight every year? If solidarity is real, why does it require a mandatory quota or financial penalty to enforce it? The Commission describes cooperation. Italy describes compliance. And that contrast is the foundation of the current conflict. One side sees reform. The other sees a repackaged version of an old problem.
For a total paradigm shift, stop human traffickers and mass illegal immigration upstream and focus on the defense of the external borders.
Because once the branding is removed, the structure becomes clearer. The pact makes management smoother for Brussels, not lighter for border states. And Italy wasn't willing to sign a solution that solves perception, but not pressure. The turning point was simple. Italy withheld support and the deal stopped. No protests, no chaos, just a formal refusal that the Commission could not override. That moment exposed how dependent Brussels is on consensus and how quickly authority weakens when even one state steps out of alignment.
Tries to curb illegal migration and makes it more difficult for asylum seekers to reach Italy and apply for a permit to stay.
It also showed other governments something critical. Brussels cannot enforce unity, it relies on it. Once that dependence is visible, the power dynamic changes. What unsettled Brussels more than the veto was what followed. Italy didn't just reject the pact, it began building a migration framework beyond EU structures. Deals like the agreement with Albania show a shift in strategy, processing claims offshore, accelerating returns, and reducing pressure on domestic facilities without waiting for collective approval.
Not be ashamed to use and defend words and concepts like nation and patriotism.
This move demonstrates that a member state can pursue migration management independently, even while remaining inside the Union. It is not withdrawal. It is bypass. And bypass is more destabilizing than disagreement. Because once an alternative exists, other governments have a template to copy. Cooperation becomes a choice, not an obligation. Rome proved that migration policy can be shaped without Brussels at the center. The Commission's concern isn't the individual project, it's the precedent.
Because we both are convinced that our freedom and the prosperity and well-being of our people do depend on security.
The pact stalling is a policy setback, but the more damaging outcome for Ursula von der Leyen is the narrative collapse. This deal was positioned as proof that the EU could still coordinate, negotiate, and act as a unified bloc on high-pressure issues. Italy's refusal punctured that storyline instantly. A project sold as a symbol of European capability became evidence of internal limitation.
Union leaders are meeting in Brussels to discuss the ongoing controversy over refugees and migrants. They're hoping to find ways to limit the number of asylum seekers entering Europe. The influx of refugees from the Middle East and Africa has created fresh division within the bloc.
For Brussels, credibility depends as much on perception as on policy execution. Once a major member openly rejects a flagship initiative, the claim of European unity becomes harder to repeat without challenge. The Commission did not just lose momentum, it lost framing control. Italy transformed the conversation from implementation to authority, and in that shift, the Commission moved from architect to respondent. Italy's decision was not contained within its borders, it functioned like a political signal. Capitals that have clashed with Brussels before took note not of the veto itself, but of the outcome. There was no immediate penalty, no isolation, no forced compliance. The system paused. That observation matters. It shows that disagreement with the Commission does not automatically come with institutional consequences.
How is it possible that somebody living in Brussels will make a decision that Hungary has to let somebody into this country?
For countries like Hungary, Poland, Slovakia, and even segments of the Netherlands and Austria, Italy's stance demonstrated that resistance is viable within the framework, not outside it. A refusal can reshape negotiation rather than end it. The Migration Pact was meant to establish alignment. Instead, it highlighted autonomy. This is where the long-term pressure lies. If one nation can hold its position without collapse, more may eventually decide the cost of conformity is higher than the cost of dissent, and that possibility is more destabilizing than the veto itself.
The goal is to target the problem at its very heart, namely the profits made by boatmen smugglers and traffickers.
Italy's decision was shaped by local conditions rather than institutional preference. Reception centers, coastal regions, and municipalities have managed arrivals repeatedly, and the strain is visible at state level in a way Brussels does not directly experience. The Commission focuses on regulatory alignment across member states, while Italy prioritizes reducing load within its own territory. This creates two different logics of decision-making. Brussels seeks standardization. Italy needs relief. When a policy offers structure but not reduction of pressure, the political cost falls on the national government, not the institution that authored the plan. Rome acted based on accountability to its electorate, which faces the operational consequences of migration policy more immediately than any European Union body.
Italy has slammed fellow European Union members for not doing enough to take their share of refugees. Since the start of October, more than 10,000 people from North Africa have added to the 460,000 refugees Italy is housing as one of the frontline states in the migrant crisis.
Italy's rejection affected not only internal policy but external perception. The pact was presented as evidence of EU alignment on migration, yet its halt showed that alignment cannot be assumed. When a single member blocks a central initiative, it signals that implementation depends on national consent, not institutional authority. For neighboring states and external partners, the outcome complicates negotiation. It becomes unclear whether agreements should be shaped with Brussels or with individual governments that may choose different approaches. For investors and observers, it raises questions about policy stability in areas labeled strategic by the Commission. The message transmitted externally is simple. The EU framework holds when members agree, but it cannot compel agreement.
To address the root causes of migration and thus guarantee the right not to migrate.
Italy's refusal now exists as precedent. It showed that a single member can stop a flagship migration policy without immediate consequence, which means the pact operates on voluntary alignment rather than enforceable cohesion. If another state takes the same stance, the system shifts from unified management to parallel national decisions, reducing reliance on Commission-driven regulation. This outcome changes the incentive structure inside the EU. Migration governance becomes negotiable instead of automatic, and state autonomy gains practical weight. Brussels is reacting cautiously because it cannot apply pressure uniformly. Italy proved that cooperation is optional. And if others act on that example, the balance of authority shifts further toward national capitals.